The 1st of September, 1939. After a false accusation that the Poles attacked a German radio station, Nazi Germany launches a retaliatory campaign against Poland, triggering World War II. Poland finds itself fighting a two-front war when it's invaded by the Soviet Union from the east on the 17th of September. Warsaw officially surrenders to the Germans on the 28th of September, and one day later, in accordance with a secret protocol to their non-aggression pact, Germany and the Soviet Union partition Poland. They divide Poland into thirds, the western third annexed to Germany, the eastern third annexed to the Soviet Union, and the middle third turned into a semi-independent administrative unit called the General Government, which is run by German authorities and divided into 4 districts, one of them being the Warsaw District. One of the German army officers to serve in the Warsaw District is Wilhelm Hosenfeld. Wilhelm Hosenfeld was born on the 2nd of May, 1895 in Hünfeld, then part of the German Empire. His family was Catholic, and he grew up in a conservative German patriotic environment. Wilhelm followed in his father's footsteps and graduated as a teacher. Christian charitable work was strongly emphasized during his upbringing, and he was also influenced by Prussian obedience and German patriotism. The First World War began on the 28th of July, 1914. Hosenfeld enlisted in the German army and served as an infantryman. He returned home seriously wounded in 1917, and for his service he received the Iron Cross Second Class. After the First World War ended, on the 11th of November 1918, Hosenfeld worked as a schoolteacher, and in 1920, he married Anna Maria Krumacher, a staunch pacifist. The marriage produced 5 children. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. Hardly any other professional group supported Hitler as fanatically as German teachers, and Hosenfeld was no exception, especially in the early stages of the Nazi regime. He joined the SA in 1933, and 2 years later he became a member of the Nazi Party. In 1936, he participated in the Nuremberg Rally and noted in his diary, "I was overwhelmed by the experience of the large group in which we marched. It's like being at war." On the 10th of March 1936, he wrote, "Goebbels is a great public speaker. He is persuasive." However, after he read Adolf Hitler's 1925 autobiographical manifesto, Mein Kampf, meaning My Struggle, and saw the deadly consequences of the Nazis' rise to power, he grew disillusioned with the regime and kept journals detailing the abuse of Jews and others. Mein Kampf promoted the key components of Nazism, rabid anti-Semitism, a racist worldview, and an aggressive foreign policy geared to gaining Lebensraum, meaning living space, in Eastern Europe. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939 with the invasion of Poland. Warsaw suffered heavy air attacks and artillery bombardment, and German troops entered the capital on the 29th of September, shortly after its surrender. The campaign in Poland ended on the 6th of October the same year, with Germany and the Soviet Union dividing and annexing the whole of the country. On the 23rd of November 1939, German civilian occupation authorities required Warsaw's Jews to identify themselves by wearing white armbands with a blue Star of David. The German authorities closed Jewish schools, confiscated Jewish-owned property, and conscripted Jewish men into forced labor, and dissolved pre-war Jewish organizations. The 44-year-old Hosenfeld was drafted into the German army in August 1939, a week before the German attack on Poland. He first served in various destinations in Poland, and as of July 1940, he was transferred to Warsaw, where he would stay until the end of the war, rising from the rank of sergeant to captain. Whilst there, he worked as a sports and culture officer, and was responsible for the sporting events at the Army Stadium in Warsaw. On the 12th of October 1940, German authorities had decreed the establishment of a ghetto in Warsaw. The decree required all Jewish residents of Warsaw to move into a designated area, which German authorities sealed off from the rest of the city in November 1940. In December of the same year, the Germans called for the death penalty for Jews who had left the ghetto without permission. The same penalty awaited any person who knowingly gave shelter to such Jews. The ghetto, which would become the largest of all the Jewish ghettos in Nazi-occupied Europe during World War II, was enclosed by a wall that was over 10 feet high, topped with barbed wire, and closely guarded to prevent movement between the ghetto and the rest of Warsaw. The population of the ghetto, increased by Jews compelled to move in from nearby towns, was estimated to be over 400,000 Jews. German authorities forced ghetto residents to live in an area of 1.3 square miles, with an average of 7.2 persons per room. Proper hygiene was almost impossible, as many homes did not have running water. Extreme overcrowding, minimal rations, and unsanitary conditions led to disease, starvation, and the deaths of thousands of Jews each month. An average daily food ration in 1941 for Jews in Warsaw was limited to 184 calories, compared to 2,613 calories for the Germans. An official German order stated that the basic provisioning of the Jewish residential district must be less than the minimum necessary for preserving life, regardless of the consequences. The hunger in the ghetto was so great that dying people were laying on the streets and small children were seen begging. Between 1940 and mid-1942, 83,000 Jews died of starvation and disease. Widespread smuggling of food and medicines into the ghetto supplemented the miserable official allotments and kept the death rate from increasing still further. When a resident from the Warsaw Ghetto passed away, their families would place the body in the street, and it would be picked up in the morning by a funeral cart that made its rounds every day. Hosenfeld was disgusted with the regime's oppression of Poles, the persecution of the Polish clergy, the abuse of the Jews, and with the beginning of the final solution, which was the Nazi plan to systematically exterminate the Jewish population of Europe. He felt sympathy for all peoples of occupied Poland and was ashamed of what some of his countrymen were doing. Hosenfeld befriended numerous Poles and even tried to learn Polish. He also attended Mass, received Holy Communion, and went to confession in Polish churches, even though this was forbidden. Hosenfeld not only expressed his deep disgust in words, but also actively helped the victims. His actions on behalf of the Poles began as early as autumn 1939, when against regulations he allowed Polish prisoners of war access to their families, and even successfully pushed for the early release of at least one. Among others, he saved the priest Anton Dzieciora from the SS, and later also his brother-in-law. One of the Jews he saved was Leon Warm, who escaped from a train to Treblinka during the 1942 deportations from Warsaw. He made it back into the city and managed to survive with the help of Hosenfeld, who employed him in the sports stadium and provided him with a false identity. On the 19th of April, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising began after the German troops and police entered the ghetto to deport its surviving inhabitants to the forced labor camps in the Lublin district. The ghetto inhabitants offered organized resistance in the first days of the operation, inflicting casualties on the well-armed and well-equipped SS and police units. They continued to resist deportation as individuals or in small groups for 4 weeks. It was the largest uprising by Jews during World War II, and the first significant urban revolt against the German occupation in Europe. In the end, however, the Germans razed the ghetto to the ground. They burned and demolished this part of Warsaw, block by block, in order to smoke out their prey. The Germans ended the operation on the 16th of May, when Jürgen Stroop, who led the suppression of the uprising, announced in his daily report to Berlin that the former Jewish quarter in Warsaw is no more. After the Nazis crushed the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Hosenfeld noted the following in his diary. "These animals, with a horrible mass murder of Jews, we have lost this war. We have brought an eternal curse on ourselves and will be forever covered with shame. We have no right for compassion or mercy. We all have a share in the guilt." One officer boasted that he had fired his pistol at Jews who were jumping out of the windows of burning houses. "I am ashamed to walk in this city. All that was left of the ghetto were in ruins. Every Pole has the right to spit on us. In Treblinka, the cattle cars are being emptied. Most of the people are already dead. The corpses are piled on top of each other by the rail tracks. Healthy men must carry the corpses away, dig up the graves, and finally, they are shot themselves. The women and children are undressed and gassed. We are all guilty." Hosenfeld smuggled his diary home in dirty laundry in 1944. If it had been discovered, he would probably have been executed for treason. On the 1st of August 1944 began the Warsaw Uprising, when the Polish Home Army, a non-communist underground resistance army, with units stationed throughout German-occupied Poland, rose against the German occupation authorities to liberate Warsaw. During the uprising, Hosenfeld had to interrogate captured fighters of the Polish underground. Against the instructions of the SS leadership, he ensured that the wounded received medical treatment, and he also demanded that they were treated in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. His help to another Jew became famous with the film The Pianist, based on Wladyslaw Szpilman's life story. Szpilman was a talented musician and a well-respected figure in the Polish music scene before World War II. At the time of the German invasion of Poland in September 1939, he was a celebrity and a featured soloist at the Polish radio, which was bombed on the 23rd of September 1939, shortly after broadcasting the last Chopin recital played by Szpilman. He supported his family playing in various cafes. However, everyone in his family, including his mother, father, brother and 2 sisters, were deported in 1942 to Treblinka extermination camp, where they were murdered. Szpilman stayed in the Warsaw Ghetto as a laborer and helped smuggle in weapons for the coming Jewish resistance uprising. Szpilman remained in the Warsaw Ghetto until the 13th of February 1943, shortly before it was abolished after the deportation of most of its inhabitants in April and May of the same year. Szpilman found places to hide in Warsaw and survived with the help of his friends from the Polish radio and fellow musicians. After the uprising in the summer of 1944, the Polish population was evicted from the city, and Szpilman remained alone, hiding in the ruins of the destroyed city, hungry, frozen, frightened, and with no support whatsoever. Hosenfeld came across Wladyslaw Szpilman in an abandoned building in August 1944 during a routine tour of Warsaw. To Szpilman's surprise, the officer did not arrest or kill him. Instead, after discovering that the emaciated Szpilman was a pianist, Hosenfeld asked him to play something on the piano that was on the ground floor. Szpilman played Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. After that, the officer brought him bread and jam on numerous occasions. He also offered Szpilman one of his coats to keep warm in the freezing temperatures. Thanks to Hosenfeld's food and supplies, Szpilman managed to survive during the critical final weeks before liberation. In January 1945, Hosenfeld surrendered to the Soviets at Błonie, a small Polish city about 30 kilometers west of Warsaw. He truthfully stated that the sports office he headed was organizationally subordinate to the so-called IC department. This information proved to be fatal for him, because in addition to assisting the troops, this department also carried out intelligence tasks. In order to force Hosenfeld to provide information about his alleged espionage activities, he was subjected to brutal interrogation in Minsk prison. After 6 months of torture and solitary detention, he was a broken man and suffered his first stroke. In a 1946 letter to his wife in West Germany, Hosenfeld named the Jews whom he had saved and begged her to contact them and ask them to arrange his release. On the 7th of May 1950, a military tribunal in Minsk in Belarus sentenced him to 25 years of hard labor for alleged war crimes and sent him to a Soviet prison camp. The trial, so the one-page verdict stated, was held in the absence of the defense. The verdict stated that Hosenfeld had personally interrogated prisoners during the Warsaw Uprising and sent them to detention, thereby strengthening fascism in the struggle against the Soviet Union. 6 months after the trial, in November 1950, Leon Warm, who owed his life to Hosenfeld, came to visit Hosenfeld's wife in Tallau, Germany. A Polish priest who had met Hosenfeld in the prisoner of war camp had found him and told him of his rescuer's predicament. Warm, who was about to emigrate from Europe, also wrote a letter to Szpilman in Warsaw. When Szpilman learned the name of the German officer who had saved his life, he acted immediately and contacted the head of the Polish secret police, Jakub Berman. Berman paid a visit to Szpilman's home and said that there was nothing he could do. Berman added, "If your German was still in Poland, then we could get him out, but our comrades in the Soviet Union won't let him go. They say your officer belonged in a detachment involved in spying, so there is nothing we can do about it as Poles, and I am powerless." Wilhelm Hosenfeld was 57 years old and partially paralyzed when he died on the 13th of August, 1952, in the Stalingrad prisoner of war camp. He passed away from internal bleeding caused by torture and serious maltreatment. In 1957, Szpilman visited Hosenfeld's widow in Tallau and told her that her husband was a hero who had saved his life. In 1998, Szpilman applied to Yad Vashem, Israel's official memorial to the victims of the Holocaust, to have his rescuer recognized. By that time, Leon Varum had already died, but his letter to Szpilman survived, and his sister wrote to Yad Vashem from Australia, confirming her brother's rescue. Before the Commission for the Designation of the Righteous could award the title, it had to be verified that Hosenfeld had not been involved in any war crimes. Once his diaries and letters were made public, the case was submitted for the Commission's review. Yad Vashem also received confirmation from the Polish Commission for the investigation of Nazi crimes that his conduct had been untarnished. On the 25th of November, 2008, Yad Vashem posthumously recognized Hosenfeld as righteous among the nations. On the 19th of June, 2009, Israeli diplomats presented Hosenfeld's son, Detlev, with the award in Berlin. There were many tears shed for Wilhelm Hosenfeld. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.